On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks lose their fourth consecutive game, and they blow a double-digit lead in all four of those games. Tonight, perhaps the most demoralizing loss of the season so far for the Hawks on this Friday to the Sacramento Kings. Certainly frustrations overflowing during, after, etc. And we'll touch on all of what transpired coming up on the podcast.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1620 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night on a Friday into Saturday. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And the place to go is PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 with PrizePicks. And also at the top of the podcast, and as always, I encourage you to make us your first listen each and every day. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts on the audio side, as well as YouTube on the video side. It's been very busy in this space in the last several days, even during the holidays. No days off here for the Locked On Hawks podcast, and I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Please tell a friend about the show. But with all that said, we'll dive into what became a maddening result for the Atlanta Hawks on this Friday, a 117-110 home loss to the Sacramento Kings. And if you only knew that, it would not be a devastating result. But with the way the things went tonight, I describe this game as perhaps the most demoralizing result of the season for the Hawks with how it unfolded. This is their fourth consecutive loss. That brings the Hawks down to 12-19 on the year. They are now a really kind of baffling 4-9 at State Farm Arena. 8-10 on the road, totally fine. 4-9 on the road, 4-9 at home, not totally fine at this point in time. And the way it unfolded, if you happen to miss this game, I know it's a holiday for some folks and people are traveling, all that stuff, but the Hawks led this game 31-8 to begin the contest, up 23 points in the first quarter. They sort of wavered a little bit in the middle of the first half, but were up by 18 at halftime and pretty much total control. But then came a pretty disastrous offensive performance in particular. And yes, I said offensive performance because usually this team's defense is the problem. Tonight it was the offense in the second half. 39 points after halftime. They couldn't make a shot. They had a 5-minute drought without scoring a point at the end of this game. And with all of that happening, the Hawks have now lost 9 games this year, in which they led by double digits. That is the second most in the entire NBA. And it's hard to sustain success when you cannot hold a lead. And the Hawks have still continued to lose all their close games, and they've blown leads again, including this 4-game losing streak. They've held a double-digit lead in the second half of all 4 games. It is very hard almost to even pull that off, and the Hawks now have done it in 4 straight games. So we'll get into kind of the big picture of this one, and then we'll sort of dive into the details, but certainly some sour moves going on at State Farm Arena tonight, and certainly with good reason, I would say. The Hawks were narrow underdogs in this game, actually, according to our friends at FanDuel before the game started. They were 1.5-point underdogs in this game, but yet another game what I would describe as kind of a coin flip game. Yes, technically underdogs, but certainly not a huge underdog. The Hawks did have their some injury issues in this game, as they kind of always have this year, I would say. The Kings were fully healthy. The Hawks are still playing without DeAndre Hunter, etc. But all excuses out the window there, I would say. And I said it before, but I'll say it again now, kind of go into it in more depth. This was an offensive failure, which is a little bit of a different category. Yes, there have been some late-game challenges for the Hawks this year, but generally speaking, the offense, which came into the night as a top 5 unit in the NBA, has not been the problem this year. It's been the defense. It's been a familiar refrain dating back to previous years and the whole Trae Young era for the most part. But in this game, they had about a 112 offensive rating by the end of it, which isn't like utterly awful, I will say, but it's below average in any context. And then you throw in the fact that you're playing at home on full rest against a Kings defense that is not the worst in the league, but certainly in the bottom 7, 8, 9 of the league. The Kings are not good defensively. So to have this output against a pretty bad defense at home at full strength is not, or at least close to full strength, is not what you want by any means. I will provide the second half numbers for you now and probably again later, I have to say. But this is just, cover your eyes kind of stuff, let's just say. So again, 39 points after halftime. They shot 28.9% from the floor and 5 of 23 from 3 in the second half, to go along with 11 turnovers after halftime. So those are just absolutely hideous numbers. There's no way of spinning that. You cannot justify that, especially for a team that's offense first. Again, one more time, 28.9% from the field, 5 of 23 from 3. to go along with 11 turnovers after halftime. And that's how you lose. That's just a very simple way to dissect what happened in this game. That second half combined, I would say they're number 2, 3, and 4 offensive options. Dejounte Murray, Bogdanovic, and Jalen Johnson combined to shoot 3 of 23 after halftime in this game. Most of that was Dejounte and Bogey, but Trey wasn't perfect by any means, but they're supporting, again, number 2 through 4 offensive creators / engineers of the offense combined to shoot 3 of 23 after halftime. Yikes. For the full game, the Hawks ended up shooting 39% from the floor. That's obviously really, really bad. 35% from 3 is not awful, but the quality of looks they were getting was really good, and they just continued to miss shots, both from 3 and it was not only that, they were actually really bad at the rim. So, according to Cleaning the Glass, the Hawks shot 50% at the rim in this game. That's 5th percentile, which is obviously quite bad. 15 of 30 directly at the rim is really, really not good. Sometimes that can be Clint Capella as a problem area for him. But in this game, Clint was 5 of 7 around the rim. So the rest of the team, I believe, was 10 of 23 at the rim in this game. For reference, that is like in the mid-40s percentile-wise. The Kings allow 68% shooting at the rim this year. So for the Hawks to shoot in the mid-40s, very bad. Broadly speaking, the NBA tracks shots, quote-unquote, in the paint as an official stat. And in this game, the Hawks were 20 of 48 in the paint. That's 41.7%. That is very bad in the paint. In the second half, they were 6 of 19. That is horribly bad. So if you're scoring at home, in the second half, the Hawks were 6 of 19 in the paint and 5 of 23 from 3. And you were going to lose when that happens. The Hawks actually won the free throw battle in this game. They won the rebounding battle in this game. They ended up taking more shots from the field and 10 more free throws than the Kings, and still losing because they just could not put the ball in the basket. It's going to sound crazy. Defensively, the Hawks did enough to win, and it's kind of the way that I would put it. Were they great defensively? No, they were not. They had about a 118 defensive rating in this game. That's about what the Kings average on offense, and they're a pretty good offensive team, so no shame in that number at all. In the second half, it was worse, to be sure, and the Kings did get hot. They made 50% of their three-point shots in the second half. But the Hawks did a pretty good job keeping them off the free throw line in this game. 15 attempts for the Kings. They did a great job on the defensive glass in this game. Only a few second chance points for Sacramento in the entire game. The number one swing on the stat sheet, and if you use your eyes in this game, was the shooting. And the Kings shot 52% from the floor and 38% from 3 in this game compared to what the Hawks did. That was, let's just say, night and day on this night. So we'll get into it more often, but I said it before, and I'll say it again now. The Hawks have now blown a second half lead of at least 10 points in all 4 of these losses. During that 4-game losing streak, the Hawks have a net rating. And by the way, if you don't know what net rating is, that means points, basically the point differential per 100 possessions. So the Hawks have a minus 28.8 net rating in the second half of the last 4 games. That's even worse than this is they're minus 33.3 in the fourth quarter. So that means the Hawks are being outscored by 33 points per 100 possessions in the fourth quarter. That is unbelievably bad. So, yes, there's variance. Yes, that I'm the first one to say, and I'll say it again now, I'll probably say it again later. There's a little bit of unfortunate luck and unfortunate variance going against the Hawks in these situations. I am a firm believer in that. At the same time, it did feel like the Hawks tensed up in the fourth quarter to me. And I'm not someone that sort of decides that willy-nilly. I think the Hawks are starting to get in their heads a little bit about these fourth quarters and these second half blown leads because, look, it felt like the shot quality got worse. And yeah, in the fourth quarter, there were some good looks that just didn't fall, but from good shooters. But Clint Capella after the game talked pretty eloquently about, like, they don't really know what's going on. It's more like, they have to yell at each other or something like that. It's a little bit of variance. It's a little bit of bad execution. Quinn always points to execution, and I think he's right on some level. But, man, the Hawks scored 39 points in a half tonight against the Sacramento Kings. And, again, the Kings are bad defensively. This is sort of what's the high point or the low point, however you want to put that, of the struggles for the Hawks in the last, really the whole month of December. It's been kind of a nightmare for the Hawks. Part of that being Jalen Johnson being out. Of course, he's back now in this game and had some moments, certainly flashes in this one. But the bench was bad. The fourth quarter was just an atrocity. And really the whole second half, again, 39 points on that kind of shooting. And we'll get into all of what transpired here. But I just want to wrap up the first segment of the podcast by just saying it's dire. And I think the vibes are bad. The season's not over by any means. There's 51 games to go for the Hawks, and if you look at their underlying metrics, they're better than this. But even I, as someone who's very level-headed, will tell you like, this is a terrible loss, and it wasn't necessarily pregame. If you said, oh, if all you know about this game is the Hawks lose by 7 points to the Kings at home, that is not a terrible loss. But the way this game unfolded, on top of the 3 previous games, just meant that it was driven home and just in a brutal fashion for Atlanta. So we'll leave it there for now. We'll have more on this game coming up in a second when it comes to the details and the nuance, etc. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by the folks at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest DFS platform in North America and also the most exciting and easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. At PrizePicks, all you have to do is pick 2 6 players that choose will have more or less than a certain number of points or rebounds or steals, etc. in basketball, or yards or something like that in football. Different categories across the board, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry at PrizePicks. They now have combo projections as well, allowing you to include 2 or more players from different sports or different leagues in your projections, and they have a huge selection of sports and stat types not offered anywhere else. They offer projections on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, and many more, and they also have a reboot policy at PrizePicks. They're the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy. I've enjoyed checking out PrizePicks for quite some time now. I'm digging in all the time on college football and the NFL, as well as basketball, both in the NBA and in college basketball. And on the whole, the experience is really fantastic with PrizePicks. It's easy, it's fun. I recommend it at the absolute highest level. And the place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100 when you get there. One more time, that is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that promo code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Check out the fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. All right, and to the game itself now, as far as the ins and outs of things, and I have to start positively at the beginning of the game. The Hawks had a great first 8 minutes of this contest. It was 31-8. Yes, 31-8 in favor of the Hawks. They had a 172 offensive rating in the first 8 minutes of this game. They were shooting the ball well from 3. They were shooting the ball well in the lane. The ball was moving. Dejounte Murray, who struggled in the second half, was very good, I thought, in the first half, getting downhill, getting to the rim. Clint Capella was everywhere in the first half. 8 points and 5 rebounds in the first 8 minutes. Trey had a couple of just absurd Trey Young passes. There was one pass fake that froze the entire Kings defense, for instance. And the Kings were ice cold. They missed their first 8 3-point attempts. They were 460 from the field in this game, and they scored 8 points on their first 18 possessions. So, all that said, the first 8 minutes of the game, the Hawks were plus 23. Last 40 minutes, they were minus 30. Tough scene. After that, obviously, the Kings had actually a run for the rest of the first quarter, 15-5 run for the Kings, where the Hawks leveled off a little bit. But still, it was a 13-point lead at the end of the first quarter, and it was the Hawks' season best as far as points allowed in the first quarter with 23. Also, their best first quarter point differential-wise at plus 13 of the season. They tied their mark of previously held. So, a very good first quarter, obviously. Rotation-wise, it was 9 guys playing in this game for Atlanta. I was surprised by the 9th. So it was a Colin Woon bogey, as you would expect, and then Garrison Matthews as sort of the 8th man. Patty Mills was the 9th guy that played, actually played more than Garrison in this game. I was confused by that. We'll come back to it later on, but that was what happened there. For those asking about AJ Griffin, I was not at all surprised to not see AJ tonight, nor was I bothered by that. I understand that I have called, and I probably will call again for AJ to play more minutes, but given that he only had one practice, but he's been gone for several weeks at this point in time, I was not expecting to see AJ in the lineup tonight, and so no surprise there. But hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll see him. Notably, Wes Matthews did not play, and usually he's been playing in every game. So keep that in mind. Maybe a little bit of a tweak there on the edge of the rotation. But in the second quarter, the Hawks sort of wavered a little bit. The lead was down to 5 as the Kings bench got going with Malik Monk and Trey Lyles. They made 7 of their next 10 threes after their cold start, did Sacramento. But Dejounte, who again was bad after halftime in the first half, made a couple big shots, a couple big threes, and I thought he was very good on the whole before halftime. The Hawks had a nice run at the end of the half to go up by 18 at the break. I thought Jalen Johnson struggled in the first quarter and a half. He made a comment about that on Twitter, and then he had a heck of a close to the first half. He was probably the biggest reason why the Hawks got into the break up by 18 points. And look, as bad as the second half was, the first half was really good. They had a 145 offensive rating. They were really flowing. They were 10 of 20 from 3 in the first half. They got to the line 17 times. They had 4 turnovers. They had 16 second chance points. The numbers were great in the first half. And honestly, if you watch them, they played really well before halftime. And of course, that is now long gone after what happened in the second half. So the third quarter, has been a problem a lot this year. It's been their worst quarter. They have a minus 6.6 net rating coming into the night in the third quarter. And of course, that got worse tonight as the Hawks were kind of bombed. As far as obviously the fourth quarter will get all the attention because the Hawks lost the game eventually in the fourth. But in by the way, including tonight, now I just updated this on my notes. They have a minus 8 net rating in the third quarter. Brutal. Out of the locker room, they scored 7 points in the first 6 minutes. The lead was down to 7 as a result of that. The Kings did have a couple turnovers in the middle of the quarter. And Quinn drew up a nice play, I thought, coming out of a timeout to get Jalen a dunk off of, get Jalen a pass to Okongwu for a dunk. But basically, the Kings got hot a little bit. They made three threes in a row late in the third quarter, and the 18-point lead was down to 5 or so. They scored 20 points in the quarter, and ironically, they made 1 3. They were 1 of 9 from 3 in the third quarter, and it was probably their worst attempt of the entire quarter. Saddiq Bey, who has been pretty cold from three-point range recently, had to kind of heave one from the corner. He was contested at the shot clock buzzer, and he made it. And the Hawks probably missed 5 open threes in the third quarter, and that was the only one they made. Kind of ironic, and kind of a foreshadowing event, I would say. So in the fourth quarter, De'Aaron Fox got going a little bit against Patty Mills at times. I thought Patty was okay defensively at times, but really was kind of not in that stretch against De'Aaron Fox. And the Hawks did have one more run in them. It was an 8-0 run early in the fourth quarter to go by 11 points with 8.5 minutes to go. Bogey finally made a 3. Trey hit a corner 3, and that was kind of where all the shots stopped falling after that. They missed 3 good looks in the next 2 minutes between Bogey and Bey. After a timeout, Dejounte missed a mid-range shot, then a turnover, and then De'Aaron Fox hit back-to-back threes, and the lead was officially gone. So the Hawks trailed for the first time in the entire game at the 6-minute mark of the fourth quarter. And at that point, they were already missing a lot of shots. Basically, that was the reason why they were already ice cold, and it only got worse from there. There was a timeout called with 4:20 to go, and the Hawks had the ball in a tie game. And spoiler alert, they never scored a point again from that point. I won't do all of the play-by-play, but offensively, here's what happened. Dejounte misses a mid-ranger. It wasn't a great possession at all, kind of a stagnant possession. A shot he can make, but a kind of a not great possession. Then Trey missed a pretty bad shot, I thought, on a 3, so he's not without blame. Missed a floater on the next possession to Trey, and a good look, just missed it. And then Murray missed again on the mid-range. Then it looked like Trey got fouled to get to the line to cut the lead from down from 4 to 2 with 2 minutes to go. That would have been a big call, except for the fact it was challenged and overturned. I didn't love the overturn. I think it was an offensive foul on Trey. I think that it was not enough for me to overturn the call, given that it was called defensively on the court. But it didn't outrage me, just kind of a bad beat there for the Hawks in that particular moment in particular, because they just couldn't score. It was a huge momentum play. Kings had the ball back, up 4. They got a stop, the Hawks did, crucially, and then they had a must-score possession, down 4 with 90 seconds to go. And then, once again, Dejounte Murray misses an open catch-and-shoot 3. It was actually a good possession, good process. If you watch that play back, Dejounte gets a shot, he just misses it. That was kind of the microcosm of the entire game in a lot of ways. Just misses it. They give a bucket on the other end of the floor to go down by 6. Then Bogey misses a 3. And then Clint gets a rebound, actually, creates the second possession, but then Bogey kind of fails to score on a mid-ranger. Not a smart shot from Bogey the second time around. Again, it probably doesn't matter. They're down 6. But what you don't want to have there down 6 is a forced mid-range 2, and that's what happened. So, oh man, it was brutal. The Hawks did not score a point in the last 4:45 of the game. That stands on its own. They had 8 consecutive empty possessions at the end of the game. 8 times with the ball, 0 points. And the Kings closed on a 9-0 run. But honestly, the Kings didn't go crazy on offense. Again, usually it's the defense that lets the Hawks down. The Kings scoring 9 points in 5 minutes is fine. That's good defense in a lot of ways. They were playing slowly, but it was the offense. They just could not score. And again, I don't think it was brilliant from Trey down the stretch or in the second half and all, but he had 16 of the 39 points in the second half. Quinn said post-game, and I think this certainly was there on film, that the Kings were trying to trap Trey, and they were. It was just that nobody else could make a shot. And again, I'll read the number I read to you earlier. The trio of Dejounte, Bogey, and Jalen, their 2 through 4 options, combined to shoot 3 of 23 from the field. Dejounte and Bogey were their 2 high-profile options other than Trey. They were 2 of 18. 2 of 18 from the floor in the second half. And some of those shots were not great, but a lot of them were good looks. They just didn't go down. And I'll have more on this in a second when it comes to individual players, but that is the microcosm of this game. The Hawks just could not score, and the 5 minutes drought at the end of the game was just like, honestly, too spot on in a lot of ways. Given that, the one overturned call was kind of a bad break, but even if that happens, they probably need to score more, and they just were not able to do so. So it was a little bit stagnant. I think the vibes, the body language was not great at the end of the game, but if you just kind of take all the emotion out of it, which you shouldn't do, I'll be very honest with you, you should not take that. It's a mental game. It's a mental toughness game. It's a physicality game for sure, but you have to be like sort of emotionally and mentally dialed in. I'll say that first and foremost. But if you take that all out of it, they got a lot of good shots in the second half. They just didn't make any of them. And unfortunately, that is a continuing trend in the last 4 games. All right, I will stop rambling about the game at this point in time. We'll have more on the player-by-player stuff in a second, but first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and as the weather gets colder, the NBA and NFL offers stay hot at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 in bonus bets. Any $25 moneyline bet right now at FanDuel, that's $150 in your pocket if your team wins. Beyond the awesome perks of signing up with FanDuel, they have everything that you're looking for across the sports betting space. That includes point spreads and over-unders and money lines, player props, future bets, and much more. The app is safe and secure at FanDuel as well. They cover the entire range of sports, and that includes the NFL, of course, college football, NBA, MLB, WNBA, college basketball. They have golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, MMA, boxing. The whole gamut of sports can be found at FanDuel. They have all kinds of stuff on the Hawks as well. Not only futures, but also the full scope of lines and props for New Year's Eve's game against the Washington Wizards up there on the road, and a full slate of offerings on the basketball space. And now is the best possible time to set up with folks at FanDuel. And the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check out the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you will not want to miss. One more time, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, and to the players in this one, again, 9 guys appeared for Atlanta. Garrison Matthews played 8 minutes, and the Hawks were +7 in those minutes. I'm not sure that was Garrison's fault or credit, but I thought he actually was fine. He had 3 points and a steal. He was 1-2 from the floor, and they were threes. He had a rebound. I thought he should have played more probably in this game. I don't really understand the next guy. We'll talk about it now, I guess. Patty Mills played 11 minutes. He took 1 shot and made it. He had no other stats, but -11 in his 11 minutes. 3 points. Patty did compete defensively. I'll be the first to say that, but he is very limited on defense, and I didn't quite understand the theory of the case for playing Patty in this game. I do understand why you wouldn't play AJ, because he has not been in the mix for so long. I get that. Wes Matthews offensively is very limiting, so I could certainly understand why you wouldn't play him, although I would have played him over Patty if I had to guess. Trent Forrest, it's kind of where I am here, is that Quinn talked about Patty's defense post-game. I think if you wanted to have just another guy who was going to be an irritant against De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk, why wouldn't you just play Trent Forrest? And I'm not saying Trent Forrest is a better basketball player than Patty Mills, but for what they used Patty to do, I would have used Trent Forrest. Because really the only thing that Patty is better at on the basketball court than Trent Forrest is creating offense. As far as obviously he's a better shooter and a better ball handler in some ways. But they didn't really ask Patty to do that. They asked Patty to kind of stand in the corner on offense and then play like on-ball defense. And I don't really understand the theory of the case there. So they could have played Garrison those minutes. They could have played Trent Forrest those minutes. They could have done something else. But I didn't really understand the theory of it. I'm not even saying that Patty was awful, because he wasn't. But I just don't really understand the thought process. But there you go. He was asked about it. He gave some plaudits to Patty's effort level. And again, he did play hard. He was playing on the ball, but I think you can still see the limitations too with him on the floor. The rest of the bench was Okongwu and Bogey, neither of whom was very good, I didn't think, in this game. Okongwu, 7.3 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block. A couple of nice high highs for Okongwu, but I thought he was probably below average on the whole. He was not the best center on the floor for the Hawks by any stretch of the imagination in this game. Bogey's been cold shooting-wise for a while. And we'll talk about Dejounte in a second, who's also been cold for a while. But Bogey, after his scalding hot 3 weeks or so, has been really rough. So 2 of 10 from 3 in this game, 2 of 4 from 2-point range. Did have 5 assists and 1 turnover, so that's pretty solid. But 12 points, 4 rebounds, and just could not get a shot to fall in this game. To the starters, Saddiq Bey, 15 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. I thought Saddiq was pretty good. He still can't make a shot. He actually was 3 away from 3 in this game, which is actually better than he's been. In December, it's been a struggle for Saddiq with his shot making, but he was 1 of 6 from 2 in this game to kind of offset that. Did have 7 rebounds again, 4 assists. He was competed defensively. He was not great on them on the floor, but I thought he gave them okay minutes in this one. Jalen Johnson actually had a career high in rebounding in this game with 15, 4 assists, then 4 turnovers, 16 points. I don't think Jalen was particularly good. He had a great stretch at the end of the first half, a couple nice flashes. And look, I give him a lot of leeway. He's been out for a long time. He's still a very young player, so I'm not worried at all about Jalen. And obviously, they need him to be on the floor. He was still effective at times in this one, and defensively, they have to kind of lean on him quite a bit now with Hunter out of the lineup. But he was not efficient. He was 4 of 8 on twos, which is fine, but 1 of 4 from 3, and had 4 turnovers. So a little bit just hit and miss. Not an awful game, but not a great game either for Jalen, other than the rebounding, which is of course very important in itself. Capella, I thought was good in this one. 12 points, 12 rebounds. 2 blocks, a steal, and 3 assists. I thought Clint was very, very good. Honestly, he didn't play as much as he probably could have in this one. They did try the Okongwu-Capella lineup for a few minutes in this game, which is more than they did on Tuesday. I would probably still do it a little bit more. But in this game against Sacramento, at least I understand why they wouldn't, because Sacramento does end up playing a lot of shooting. It kind of makes it tough on those guys. But I thought it was at least reasonable. And I thought Capella gave them good minutes, especially in the first half. And then the backcourt. So Dejounte, tale of two halves. Honestly, as I said it before, I thought he was actually very, very good in the first half of this game. He was getting to the rim, and that's always a telltale sign for me with Dejounte, is if he's getting all the way to the rim, getting downhill with his drives, he's so much better. But in this game, he stopped doing that. So it's a little bit, I have to assign a little bit of variance to this. There's no way it's this stark as far as like true talent level, but these are the first half, second half splits this year for Dejounte Murray. In the first half, he's shooting 48.6% from the field and 45.1% from 3. Obviously, that 3-point range number is well above what he actually is. Dejounte is a pretty good shooter. He's not that. Second half, 42% from the field and 30.1% from 3. So a massive, massive, massive downturn shooting-wise. First half, second half. Again, I don't think it's like a true talent thing. It's just kind of what's happened. And by the way, in December, he's shooting 19% from 3 in the second half. That includes tonight. So it's been a theme. He's not been alone, by the way. I'm trying desperately to not single out Dejounte because Bogey's been the same thing. And by the way, this is the last 4 games. So the last 4 games, a.k.a. the losing streak, the combination of Bogey and Murray in the second half, which is when those games have been lost, the two of them combined for 20 of 71 from the floor. That's 28%. And 7 of 40 from 3. And look, Trey is the engine of everything in Atlanta. He's their best player. He's the sun, moon, stars. If Bogey and Dejounte do that, there's nothing Trey can do. There's nothing anybody can do. Because Bogey and Dejounte are their number 2 and 3 options on offense. If they shoot like that, the Hawks are going to lose. And that is what's happening in the last 4 games. It's not just that. That's a huge piece of it. So it's not just Dejounte, but I thought Dejounte was like outwardly bad in the second half. Bogey was not very good either, but Dejounte I thought was kind of notably worse. And it was 18 points in the game, 7-20 from the floor, but 3 of 12 on twos. And a lot of those were like those tough mid-rangers that he can make them, but not the best process in the world. A positive stat, probably the only one in this game, is that Trey and Bogey now have the 2 longest streaks in the entire NBA of making 2 threes or more in every game. Bogey has the franchise record with 24 in a row, but Trey made 2 more threes in this game. He actually has 19 straight games with at least 2 threes. I thought Trey was pretty okay. He wasn't his best. 24 points, 9 assists, 4 steals for Trey, actually pretty active there, and 4 of 8 from 2, 3 of 10 from 3, got to the line 7 times, made all 7. So he was like not super efficient, but was actually okay. In the second half, he again had 16 points after halftime. He was the only guy that really did much of anything offensively after halftime. And yeah, he wasn't his best. He took 1 bad shot late. He missed a floater that he could have made in the last 4 minutes. Like, I'm not saying Trey was blameless because he wasn't, but I think on the, usually when the offense bogs down, people kind of point to Trey because Trey's the guy, and I get all that. A lot of it falls on him a lot because good or bad, it's going to fall on Trey. But in this game, it was not really Trey. If you watch the game, it was really more Bogey and Dejounte and other guys missing shots, etc. So that's all I have on this particular contest. Big picture, I'll just say it again out loud. This is one of the worst losses of the season for the Hawks. As far as big picture, again, there's the vacuum in which the Hawks lose by 7 points to a team that has been better than them this year. Yes, at home, but like that's not disastrous. But when you factor everything in, up 23 early in the first quarter, up 18 and a half, up double digits in the fourth quarter, to have all that happen and then to have this kind of collapse at home on a Friday in front of a lively crowd, etc., and to get booed. I mean, they got booed, and rightly so. Like, I'm not a big boo the home team guy. I'm just not. That's my personal opinion. But I don't blame Hawk fans at all for booing tonight, like on the way out. And it wasn't like unanimous boo. It wasn't like the Pistons, sell the team chance. That wasn't happening at the end of this game. But there was some boos, and it was deserved. I mean, Clint had kind of talked about it like pretty candidly as a veteran would. Like, they know. I mean, they're all feeling it. There's no question about that. Quinn's been frustrated, and nobody's happy. Does that mean the season's over? Again, it does not. Would it surprise me if the Hawks just went on a run here? No, it wouldn't. But right now, the record is 12-19. And given that, yes, Jalen missed some time, I would have been very surprised about this Hawks team being 12-19 with the injury bug not blasting them. Yes, Jalen missed a bunch of time, but Trace played all but 2 or 3 games. Bogey's played all but 2 or 3 games. DeJounte's played all but, I think, 1 or 2 games this season. Yes, Hunter's been out for a while. Jalen's missed some time. But Bay, Capella, Okongwu have all been healthy. Like, they've had probably average or better health this year. And to be 12-19 and 4-9 at home, you know, at the end of the day, this is professional sports. You are what you are as far as your record is concerned, and the Hawks have underachieved violently. So we'll have more in the future about why that's happening, my opinions, and I'll try to share some of those on this podcast. I think that the offense is not a problem area on the whole, but it has been the last 4 games in the second half. So we'll get into all of it more later on in detail. I'll have guests on the podcast, give you some more color and some more picture. But a bad loss for the Hawks, no question about that. And I think people who listen to this podcast regularly will know that, like, you know, I try to give you the whole picture, and there isn't a whole lot of positive spin you can put on this game, to be sure, especially given the fact they had lost 3 games in a row before that, and this is 4 in a row now, and a pretty dire spot for the Hawks on the whole. From there, before we get out of here, the Hawks play their last game of the calendar year 2023 on New Year's Eve, which is a Sunday afternoon. They play a 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern time game in the middle of an NFL Sunday against a bad Wizards team in D.C. So I don't know how much that game is going to get attention locally. I'm sure some folks will be watching. I will be watching and covering the game as always. The Wizards actually won tonight. They are now 6-25 overall. They are very bad, but they won tonight. They beat the Nets at home, and the Wizards had the advantage of not having to travel. So the Hawks will be favored, I would imagine, barring a lot of injuries. But nothing is a given, quite obviously, with the way this Hawks team is playing right now. So I'll say this now: they cannot afford to lose that game. The Wizards are 6-25. I know they're not as bad as the Pistons or maybe the Spurs, but that's a bad basketball team, and you got to win that one. So we'll circle that one. We'll come back to it later on, and we'll talk about it all. And yes, I'm not taking the day off. Sometimes I will have to take a game or 2 off throughout the course of the season, but I will have a podcast on New Year's Eve. So if you are a listener frequently, I'll be here New Year's Eve post-game for all your Atlanta Hawks needs after the game. So with that said, please subscribe to the podcast. If you made it all the way to the end, bless you, number one. And number 2, if you've not subscribed across platforms, whether it be on the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, also on YouTube, you can like and subscribe on that platform as well. Tell a friend about the podcast, maybe 2 friends about the podcast, your family as well if you happen to be traveling right now, and I'd really, really appreciate it. Ratings and reviews, appreciate it as well. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. Follow all my written work on the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland as well. And thank you very much for listening to the podcast. We'll have one more show in 2023, again, post-game, after the game on Sunday. And until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you all next time.